Welcome, everybody. Sean Reynolds and Ken Weeb from Sportsnet here for your Jets post-game show after a very impressive Jets win. Ken, we were talking off camera here. The Wolves were getting hungry here. People wondering if they missed the show. I love this one here from Wrench Doozer, who says, someone asked him, am I missing the show? And he says, nope, I think they're doing their real jobs. And then he corrects it and says, main jobs. But you know what? I like that. I like that he says we're doing our real jobs, because I don't think we could call doing this show a job, because we enjoy it far too much, Ken, to call it work in any way, shape, or form. Yeah, exactly. But let's get right into it. 5-2 win for the Jets over the Toronto Maple Leafs, closing the gap in the North Division for first place to just 3 points. Your assessment of the game?
Well, impressive showing overall, Sean. I would say there's no doubt about that. Interesting start. I think a lot of people thought that was going sideways quickly, I believe. Early goal. Not a great turn of events. A lot of blowing up of the inbox about the back check and the turnover and the sort of reads overall. But Jets regrouped. Obviously, Sean, anyone who's played the game a long time knows that when you get a penalty kill like that on a 5-on-3, it can be a big boost. And one of the strange things happening this year with the Maple Leafs, their power play has really struggled. I mean, obviously, their biggest power play weapon, Austin Matthews, was not there tonight, but their power play has been in a huge funk now for almost 20 games. So, yeah, I mean, it's really, kudos to the Jets penalty kill. They did the job, and then they picked it up really well from there. I really thought they were pretty tidy defensively. Hellebuyck he looked so supremely confident, and I mean, the Jets really cranked it up. Their speed was absolutely awesome. Their speed was absolutely great.
Yeah, no. Hey, Ken, quick question. Why does Troy Stevens, or I don't even know if it's just him, why is everyone always wishing you a happy birthday for every single show?
He came on the first show, and maybe he thought it was a joke, but it was actually my birthday on March 25th when we did the show. So I don't know.
Well, that's what I was saying, because I very much knew when your birthday was, because it happened on the show. But I've noticed this keeps happening. I don't know if it's a running joke. I didn't know if it was an inside joke, and I was like, Ken, if it's an inside joke, you got to let me in on it. I'm part of the show.
I'm not in on the joke. I don't know. One quick one. Ryan, can you hear me now? Sorry, I must not have been. I was a little too far away from the microphone. I'm guessing it's better, but
got to get that sound balanced out. Got to get it going. So, that's an interesting. I think it was Chris Johnson, CJ, our guy in Toronto, and one of our great insiders on Sportsnet, who had said that the Leafs had just fallen out of the top 10 in the power play department for the first time this season. I mean, it says two things. One, it says how bad their power play has been lately, but two, how phenomenal it was at the beginning of the season that they stayed in the top 10 for as long as they have, when their power play has gone like absolutely dormant for weeks now.
Well, I think they even had an over 28 stretch recently. At least I was watching one of their broadcasts, and man, oh man, that's hard to believe. I mean, with all that talent they've got there, but they just looked a little bit disjointed to me on the power play, Sean. Even though they have all that talent, but I mean, the Jets really did a nice job, impressive job overall. I mean, that Nikolai Ehlers, the effort it took on that second goal, absolutely phenomenal. I mean, again, he stripped the puck from one of the craftiest players in the National Hockey League, Mitch Marner. It wasn't like yesterday where Thomas Chabot was surprised that Trevor Lewis blew by him. Mitch Marner knew Nikolai Ehlers was in hot pursuit, and he still was unable to prevent Ehlers from stealing the puck. What an excellent job there, and what a game overall. Again, another great shot by Ehlers. Thought he was flying, and again, it wasn't just the offense. You saw some physical play. You saw some great hustle, and again, just an absolutely awesome, dominant performance by Nikolai Ehlers. And hey, we were talking about Kyle Connor. Sure, one of them was an empty netter, but hey, absolutely pure finish on that 2-on-1 with Scheifele. And once again, Scheifele, impressive game after the early turnover and a little bit late on the back check. Again, the one thing about that goal, I mean, I think Josh Morrissey was the only guy who played it properly. Pullman, he can be aggressive on Marner, but then you can't allow that lane to go across, right? I understand Marner is one of the best passers in the NHL, but that whole play was a little bit of a struggle. And then it was a little bit of an interesting development on that second goal. I mean, I think I wouldn't call it a bad line change. They changed in the right spot, but the sort of the pickup off the bench, and then I mean, Spezza was not in a dangerous position. He was in the corner, but the thing happened there where DeMello had to come over, and then, some people will say, well, yeah, well, Dubois looked like he was late. Well, that's off the line change. So it wasn't that he was, lazy getting into the zone. It was just one of those things where the sort out didn't work out. Overall, I mean, Hellebuck played very well again. I think you probably expected a little, yeah, sure, Butter, that's fair. I mean, that's fine to expect it, but you got to be sure, right? I mean, and it's good to pressure, but I mean, try to prevent he tried to prevent, again, this is one of the best players in the NHL. So interesting development late. I mean, we'll see on Saturday. Forbert, when he got tangled up in that 3-car pileup there with Zach Hyman, he looked like he was definitely, looked like he was injured. Certainly was in discomfort. I don't know if he's actually injured, but to me, I mean, I'll be interested to see what happens. I mean, we know that Logan Stanley's not going to be parked. I think the Jets want to see Billy Hannel, and we'll get to him in a second. They would like to see him against Edmonton. I would think it makes a lot of sense for him to play again, right? Play back to back after getting back into the lineup. But if Forbert is banged up a little bit, then, well, hey, fans were asking for Logan Stanley in that position. Well, we'll see if he goes there or not. But I mean, again, too, who knows? Maybe you see Pionk and Hannel at times there. It was tough to tell for the folks that are asking about it, whether it was a slew foot or a stick. It looked like Forbert was coming to the aid of Pionk after the initial play. And then he just got tangled up and fell to the ground. Kind of funny.
So I want to let everyone know when this COVID thing is over and behind us and we're all vaccinated and whatever, I'm looking forward to the day I can invite Ken to my house for supper, to meet my family, and he's never met my family before, and I haven't met his, and I'm looking forward to that day. But when we do, and I serve him supper, I'm going to serve him his appetizer, his main course, his dessert, and give him his cigarette all at the same time. Because if you notice, he just chews through everything. He doesn't leave anything for the show. You covered everything from the game in that answer. And so show's over, everybody. Thank you for showing. No, I'm just kidding. We'll dig deeper into all this kind of stuff. I want to touch on something someone was saying earlier in the game, or sorry, in the comment section, where they felt that Pierre-Luc Dubois asked where he was on this evening. So I'm going to start, and I want to talk about what I thought was a funny answer I got from Paul Maurice, because I put a question to him about potentially the freeing up of the players, right. The players like Mark Scheifele, Kyle Connor, by having Pierre-Luc Dubois on their line. The whole idea was to take Ehlers off that line because Paul Maurice felt there was too much of the same thing. So you added defensive element. I thought maybe it freed things up for them on this evening. Same thing with Nick Ehlers playing on a line with Kopp and Stastny. I thought it allows him to head up ice. I mean, I think he took the question as though I was suggesting that those guys weren't playing defense and that they were bailing on the zone and taking off. That's not what I meant by that. And that's what sucks about doing this COVID stuff, because we get to ask one question and then you get moved right back to the back of the line. You can't do a re-ask. So if you ask something and it's misinterpreted, you can't say, whoa, that's not what I meant. I meant this. But he said in theory that should be the idea of how it should work. And I just wonder, again, I'm not saying that those guys now don't have to play defense and they can just head up ice. That's not the suggestion. But I do think that defensive element on those lines allows those guys to play on their toes. The old hockey saying of playing on your toes, not on your heels. And it looked to me tonight, couple odd man rushes for Scheifele and Connor. One results in a goal. One results in a near chance. Scheifele gets down the ice for the breakaway. Ehlers gets down the ice to, as you'd said, pressure Marner. I guess in the long and the short of it, I want to talk about the line juggling that's happened, the results we've seen from it, and whether you think, Ken, that the offensive players are being freed up by the decisions made to switch the lines the way that Paul Maurice has done.
Yeah, I mean, certainly it's working out. I think it's maybe part of it, but again, I don't think it's as simple as just chemistry there. I think that it's Pierre-Luc Dubois finding a comfort level there. I think that Kyle Connor was when Kyle Connor's skating and when he's got his speed going, he's very dangerous. He's one of the best finishers in the National Hockey League. That's 4 consecutive 20-plus goal seasons, and the first 3 were the first 3 were 30 goal seasons, and last year would have been 40 goals if it was an actual full season. So he's a great finisher. Mark Scheifele, Paul Maurice was quite blunt in saying that those guys got pretty much pissed off about what happened on the first goal. They dug in and had an excellent game. So I think it is important for that group for sure. And the other part too, Sean. I mean, you've been calling for that other line, and again, they had another solid effort. I thought I liked that line a lot. Paul Stastny, such a cerebral player, doing a nice job with that grouping. I really liked a lot of what they were able to accomplish. Third line steady again. I mean, the top guns for the Leafs. I know Tavares scored on the backdoor goal, but kept in check again. And Sean, I mean, you talked about it in one of the questions. I mean, the Jets have found a recipe for keeping those guys under wraps. And
right.
Again, we've been talking about this for quite some time. I mean, Mark Scheifele needed to have kind of an authoritative moment. And on a night when Austin Matthews wasn't there, yes, Nikolai Ehlers is also sharing the marquee, but Mark Scheifele had one of his best games, against the Leafs, and that was well before the empty net assist. I mean, he had a great game.
So to your point about the style, because that's the interesting question. Going down the stretch here, Paul Maurice has really said that these games coming up against Edmonton, the games coming up against Toronto, the games against the playoff teams will be about figuring out the style of game that the Jets need to play against those teams going into the playoffs. And I remember early in the season, Paul Maurice had talked about this Toronto Maple Leafs team. What makes them dangerous is their ability to make those passes into the slot, find those passing lanes between skates, under sticks, through a forest of trees, and still be able to execute those things. Now, again, I know Austin Matthews wasn't there tonight and William Nylander wasn't there, but I didn't think that team had us. What's that?
Foligno,
yeah. Well, I mean, we haven't seen him yet.
They were missing the point is big chunk
the first couple times we saw this Toronto Maple Leafs team, they were doing that. They were pulling that off against the Winnipeg Jets. They were getting to the front of the net. They were getting passes into the front of the net. They were creating a lot of chaos there. I didn't think they got a sniff tonight. Like another good game for the most part by Connor Hellebuyck. But it was another one of those nights where, I mean, it's almost like it's damning to say, Hellebuyck had a really good night, but his team actually gave him really good support because we're so used to, in years past, him kind of being left out to dry at times and him having to steal the game. Well, he wasn't put in that position tonight. His team did a really good job, and Kevin Sawyer talked about it on the broadcast, a really good job of directing the shots to the outside to very predictable spots that Connor Hellebuyck knows that those shots are going to be coming from. And to me, that's the style of game that beats that Toronto Maple Leafs team. And if I take a look at how the Jets have played the Leafs the last 4 times they've played them, I know I don't want to get too out of control because Austin Matthews was out of the lineup and he's a big player. But for me, the last 4 games they've played, they've done a phenomenal job of keeping the Leafs out of that area and absolutely burying the Leafs when the puck does get in that area so that they don't have a chance to capitalize when they get the puck in that area.
Yeah, and I mean, to me, this reminded me of the game that ended that last road trip where the Jets were able to take 2 out of 3 from Toronto when Brossoit played, and they were very tidy defensively. There were a few more shots on goal today than compared to that. I think 22 shot effort the other time when Brossoit was in. But the Jets have done a nice job of not getting into the high event hockey after the early going. I mean, we know that the first game, the Jets were not good. Hellebuyck was the only reason it was a 3-1 game. Then there was another game where Hellebuyck was out of his mind. Then the Jets lost in overtime on a ridiculous goal from Austin Matthews. Since that time, they've been a lot better defensively in those games. I mean, we were talking about this. The Jets need to clamp down. They know what the recipe is to try to beat Toronto, try to beat some other high-end teams, and they were able to get it done. There's no doubt about that. So. But again, going back to it, Sean, I mean, sometimes teams need a boost. I mean, Nikolai Ehlers, he talked about it. The 5-on-3 gave them a boost. And again, a lot of people on our pregame show are talking about taking Derek Forbort out of the game. I mean, he's on their top penalty killing unit. The Jets' penalty killers have been excellent. So the Jets aren't going to leave Logan Stanley. Eventually will probably grow into that role. But right now, Forbert and DeMello are their top pairing on the penalty kill, which is why there's never any danger of them being out of the lineup. So I don't actually, sorry, just a quick one. A lot of people ripping Jack Campbell, and one of them was a 2-on-1 with one of the best snipers in the NHL, and the other was a clear-cut breakaway from a top 5 NHL scorer. So I don't see the bubble bursting at all for Jack Campbell. It was important for the Jets to score 3 goals on him and chase him from the game. That certainly will hurt his confidence. But
yeah, I mean, I don't think that either's goal is the greatest goal. And then if you're going to let in the next 2 shots you face after that, whether or not they're high danger chances or not, I mean, that's when you're expecting. I mean, my guess is Connor Hellebuyck would have stopped one of those 3 shots, because he would have. What does Connor Hellebuyck do when he lets in a bad goal? He stiffens up and he heads. So I'm not agreeing that Jack Campbell, it's done, it's over, the bubbles burst, he's gone. I don't think that for a second. He had an off night. But he wasn't good tonight. He didn't give his team a chance, and when they needed a save, he didn't come up with those saves.
I mean, again, if Matthews scores on a breakaway, it's not an abnormal occurrence. So to me, I mean, the first goal he didn't like, sure, but I mean, 2-on-1, the pass was crispy and across. I mean, it was a good shot. I don't call 2 or 3 of those muffins at all. So
no, but by no means were they muffins. I'm not saying that. I'm just saying, like elite goaltenders will come up with a way to find a save. You know what I mean? In that moment, right?
So, I mean, again, in those 2 other games in Winnipeg, Campbell was exceptional. So
agreed. I thought he won them those 2 games, right? I mean, that's what, the Jets got a little bit of a taste of their own medicine in those games, because, how often do the Jets go out and maybe not have their best game and Connor Hellebuyck steals it? Well, I thought Jack Campbell was that, and I mean, it would have made it interesting. We talked in the pregame show about like the deliciousness of this goaltender battle that was brewing between 2 very good friends in Jack Campbell and Connor Hellebuyck. It just did not materialize tonight. Someone had asked earlier.
Sorry, one other quick one here. Sorry, for those people who didn't like the Ehlers shot, it was a perfect screen by Matthew Perreault. He couldn't see it, so I don't think that was a bad goal either.
Oh, okay, so here the
Perreault came right across the front. It was a perfect shot because he took his eyes away.
Whose shot?
Ehlers.
Oh no, he saw that shot all the way in. From my assessment, he saw that shot all the way in. I'll give him this. I'll give him the fact that Matthew Perreault was right beside him and had his stick up in the air. That maybe he took his focus away, thinking that he was going to get a stick on it and redirect that. But I don't know. I don't give that one away. That shot went right through him. I'm not taking it. And you know what? I looked at it. I guess we're seeing 2 different things. But to me, he looked like he saw it the whole way. His reaction after it went through him was the reaction of a guy who was like, man, I thought he had that. But holy smokes, we got to say hi to Joe Pascucci here. I know we've had him on some of our pre-games earlier on our Instagram, but welcome, Joe Pascucci. Joe, I think I've said it before in this space or one of these spaces, but I mean, I'm at Sportsnet. One of the reasons is because Joe Pascucci, who I worked with in my early years in the industry at Global, was one of my references and gave me, it's still one of my favorite stories. I won't say what it was that he said, but there's a very humorous story of when they called up and asked him about me, what he said to them to convince them to take me on. Joe Pascucci is a great man and a legend in this town, and it means a ton that he stopped into the show to ask some questions. And I'm sure you can see Troy Stevens here, people jumping in. I'm gonna hold on. I'm gonna tell
former Winnipeg Jet.
Oh yeah, for sure. Yeah, excellent. I got to tell my Joe Pascucci story. Yeah. Early when I was working there, they had me doing the weather, right? Like you're just trying to stick in a newsroom and hang around and get into the industry. And it was when the World Cup was on and Italy won the World Cup, right? And so what does Joe do? Joe heads down to Corden Avenue, where the Italian community is loud and proud, and they all get lined up behind him, and they're so happy, 1, because they won, but 2, because like Joe Pascucci is like a big guy in their community, and they're all chanting as he's about to go live, Joe Pascucci, Joe Pascucci, and it's getting louder and louder, and they're kind of whipping themselves up into a frenzy. And like usually people would be like sucking this up and being like, this is amazing. And like right before he's supposed to go on air, Joe just turns and says, quiet down, everybody. And it's like he stopped people chanting his name because he's such a pro. He wanted to turn around and he wanted to make sure that it was a good hit and people could hear it. But it was just funny. I mean, like, how many people out there would stop this like overwhelming adoration for themselves in order to turn around and do the job right, just right off the bat. I love that story. I always think of that when I think of Joe. Phenomenal guy. Joe, thanks for hopping on the show, and we'll take you anytime. We should bring him on the show one of these times, Ken. We should get him on here.
We know he watches closely. There's no doubt about that.
Yeah, you closely. Bet.
Some people going back to CKND days. Those are some classics. Joe has got great history. Another beauty here, Pascucci and Gino, Mean Gene.
Yeah, Mean Gino, who we were gonna try and get him on our trade deadline show, and again we had to apologize to everybody because the way it worked out with our actual jobs, we just couldn't fit it in there. But he'd been interested in coming on. So Gino wants to talk with all of you. He wants a chance to jump on and see everybody and chat with everybody. So let's get that going one of these times, because Gino is just the absolute best, phenomenal guy. There was a question earlier on, and I want to get to it. And we should talk about it because this road trip without Blake Wheeler has gone very well for the Winnipeg Jets. Why?
I mean, I think that they played, they're getting close to their identity. I mean, we heard people reference it. We heard Paul Stastny talk about it. For as much as we were discussing, in an optimal world, they would be, locking in their lines and things of that nature. But Jets getting back to doing what they do best. I mean, yes, goaltending was very solid again for the majority of this road trip, but the team clamping down defensively as a 5-man unit. Their offense kind of got clicking, and hey, their power play is really rolling, Sean. I mean, they're really getting things going, and we've had this debate all year long: first unit, second unit. The second unit went out first a few times today. That was certainly noteworthy. So. Impressive job by those guys. They've done a nice job. They're pushing one another, and now they're pretty much even in goals. So that's a good thing. They really want to do the job. And again, we should also mention this here. I mean, Sean, Jets have yes, they've just finished a stretch of 17 out of 22 on the road, but they lead the league in road wins. I mean, anytime you're near the top of the league in road wins, that says something about a group's ability to, kind of rally together and get the job done when it matters. I mean, these games are not easy because Mark Scheifele referenced it several times. Felt like they've been on the road forever. Paul Maurice saying people were on edge, right, Sean? I mean, and we noticed this a few times during the road trip in terms of some of the answers that were given. So they did a nice job in that area. And you talked about it. I mean, if the Jets don't get home ice advantage, guess what? They've been one of the best road teams in the NHL. So I don't think it'll matter that much to them.
Yeah, and it's interesting because you can hear it in the answers by the players. Mark Scheifele, when asked about, I believe it was you who asked him about them doing so well on the road. I mean, for him, it's depth. It comes down to depth. It comes down to they believe they can put any line out on the ice, and that those lines can take on any other line from any other team at any time. So to have that kind of confidence, how can you not do well on the road? And it kind of answers a question I had at the beginning, on our pregame show when we talked about, does having that depth, is that the great eraser when it comes to not having the last change, or does it become more important to have the last change to properly move and utilize that depth? Talking to Mark Scheifele, it's the former, because he entirely believes that they can just send anyone out there and entirely take care of whichever line they're up against, which I think we should talk about the fourth line. We don't do it enough on this show, and I think that we should probably land on something. These guys took a battering at the beginning of the season on Twitter. A lot of the guys said, I can't tell you how many times I heard or I saw and read tweets of people saying that Nate Thompson is not an NHL player. I mean, I don't know how you could ever argue that at this stage with what he's done. That line goes out and near dominates every time they're out there. They are constantly, I don't know, are they still at the stage where they haven't allowed a 5-on-5 goal this year?
That's a good question.
I can't remember.
We know Harkins has now stepped into that unit, so I think that was just related to the pro line.
Just to the pro unit, but again, I mean, regardless, you got these guys who are not allowing goals. They're scoring big goals. Trevor Lewis with the game winner last game. I mean, I'm not going to say that they're the best fourth line in the league. I'm not going to get all crazy like that. But this line has come in and done everything the Jets could have possibly hoped for them to do. And on top of that, we should get talking, a little deeper into special teams. But I mean, those two players, Lewis and Thompson, are a major reason why this team just is not giving up shorthanded goals and winning games on special teams.
Yeah, I mean, it's interesting, Sean. I mean, we noticed it and we talked about it, a couple of weeks ago when, Mason Appleton was replaced by Nate Thompson on the penalty kill. And I mean, initially I was like, well, I thought Appleton's done a really nice job on the penalty kill this year. Kind of tough break for him, but you know what? Thompson's doing a nice job. And the other part of that is it helps keep Mason Appleton a little bit fresher for when that line is checking. So, yeah, I mean, I think you got to give credit where credit is due. Those guys are responsible. Trevor Lewis, I think, again, Trevor Lewis is showing some nice speed. He showed that great burst yesterday. And, even though Thomas Chabot was a little bit, maybe a little bit laissez-faire, or maybe he didn't know where the puck was initially, but Thomas Chabot's one of the best defenseman skaters in the National Hockey League, and Trevor Lewis was not caught by him. So, right. And then he went and roofed the shot. And again, credit where credit is due. Jansen Harkins was put in a very difficult position. We'll get to Ville Hannel in a minute. Speaking of guys who didn't play in a month, Jansen Harkins has come back in, and I've really enjoyed watching his. I think he's given that line a boost. He makes smart plays offensively. He's responsible defensively. He's got great jump on that line, and really done a nice job there. I think he's been really excellent. And yeah, I mean, I totally understand. Earlier on in the year, Christian Vesalainen came in, did a nice job. Today he was next man up, I believe. But I mean, right now there's no reason to put anyone else in the lineup. Those guys are playing well. I mean, down the stretch, if they want to rest them 1 or 2 games, fine. But there's really no reason to not play that fourth line. They're doing an excellent job, and I think they deserve credit for the job they've done.
I wanted to touch on that because the one thing that you bring up, that play with Thomas Chabot, I know he lost the puck there. I remember I watched it and I thought it was a really weird play, and I know he kind of got a little bit confused and lost the puck there. But if he couldn't find the puck, his instinct, easy to be the armchair quarterback, right? And Thomas Chabot, I'm telling you right now, I covered him in the World Juniors. I think the world of him. I said before, I think that he's going to win a Norris Trophy. I think once that team starts being a really solid team all around, I think he can get there. But I mean, on that play, if you've lost the puck, you need to be getting back to make sure, like, if you don't know if it's ahead of you or behind you, your instinct has to be to go defend and get back down the ice. And I thought it was a very laissez-faire play, and it ends up being the difference in that Jets win. Kind of similar tonight with Marner and Nick Ehlers. In Marner going and kind of getting the puck, if you look at the rebound, he gets it and kind of lazily turns right into Nick Ehlers, who's on top of him. He's not trying to protect the puck. He's trying to get back and make something happen down ice. And so it made me think this. I give the Jets a ton of credit this season for, I know there's a lot of times that they haven't been their best, and Connor Hellebuck has stolen games. And I think that there's a lot of times in games that, they may have got a better result than they deserved. But the one thing I will give the Jets credit for consistently is they come out with energy and effort at the right times. And you look at that Ehlers goal, which I think kills this game tonight, puts the W in the column for the Jets. And you look at that Lewis goal the other night, it's an example of the Jets putting out the effort and being the harder working team at the right points of the game than their competition. And we're talking about the Toronto Maple Leafs right now, who are first in the division. And you got to give the Jets credit for that. They talked about it in the post game about playing the right way. Nick Ehlers talked about saying that he thinks his team comes out and consistently gives 100%. I mean, I'll say this, that, they came out, they started slow here tonight. The pushback is strong. We've seen, earlier in the year when they were kind of falling out of games and like surging late and winning games, that they are able consistently, and this has been the one constant for them from the beginning of the year to the end. When they've needed to go out and get a push, they typically get that push. Sure, a night here or there that it's an off night. There hasn't been many of them, but it goes back to the point you've been asking a lot of those questions. This team doesn't lose 2 games in a row very often. because when they lose that game, they can manufacture that energy for the next game and come out with the right push and get the right result. And they deserve credit for that. And I honestly think it's one of the things that we should be talking about more with this team heading into the playoffs, because I like the idea of what they're going to be able to do in a 7-game series when they are able to generate the effort at the right time against teams that I'm not so sure I'm seeing that from a lot of the other teams in this division. You get it from the top line in Edmonton. Again, Toronto's, I think they're up and down. Montreal, I think that's really, like, you don't know what you're going to get from Montreal, but the Jets, you know what you're going to get from them, and that's worth something.
Oh, man, I mean, it's their calling card, the ability to bounce back. And again, people were saying, oh, well, this is no big deal. Well, the Jets were the second last team to not lose consecutive regulation time games. And the only team that had a longer stretch than them was the Florida Panthers. And they're battling for first place in one of the best, top-end divisions in hockey with Carolina and Tampa. So, I mean, again, a lot of people were saying, oh, yeah, it's no big deal. It was like, well, it is a big deal, because a lot of teams go on long. I mean, again, we talked about it in the pregame. I mean, the Leafs lost 8 of 9 at one point, which is crazy to think of when you think of how great their year has been. 3 losses in a row. I mean, yes, one was in overtime, but we talk about the Jets needing to get things going, Sean, and find their optimal combinations. Matt, Toronto's got to be thinking the exact same thing. Like, they've got to get some things rolling as well.
It was weird.
Some people have been asking. I mean, you've talked about this too. I mean, do you think, within 3 points, can the Jets catch the Leafs? I mean, we're not sure if it matters.
Sure they can.
Do you think they can?
For sure they can. I mean, okay, if they lost tonight, if Toronto went 2 points ahead tonight, right, and was up 7, I would have said no. I would have said, right, I mean, like, start figuring out what you're going to do against the Edmonton Oilers. But I mean, for sure they can. 3 points back now, the way they've played them. I mean, Toronto won the previous 2 games, but they had to squeak them out. I absolutely love the style of hockey they're playing against them. And I mean, you know what? Here I am talking about, like, the consistency of the Jets and everything that they've done. Toronto had that real big fall the last time they played, they right before they played the Winnipeg Jets, and then during when they played the Winnipeg Jets in that 3-game set where, they outplayed Winnipeg for the first 2 games, but only came away with 1 win. But they seem to be going for another. They righted the ship, but they seem to be going for another little bit of a dip again, and it makes me wonder. This is such a strange season, Ken. I feel like we're in uncharted territory, and you kind of talked me off the ledge about this earlier on, because there's part of me that is looking at the Jets tinkering with lines and doing this kind of stuff. And I've said it a bunch of times, and you know where I'm going with this. 2018, the last 15 games of the season, they knew who they were. They knew who their lines were. They were very defined, and they went into that playoffs on fire and didn't get stopped. No one stopped them until that Vegas team kind of caught them by surprise. Doesn't look like that's going to happen this year, and it doesn't look like it's going to happen. To your point, a lot of it has to do with COVID and a shorter season, trying to figure this out. But I'm looking around the North Division right now, and when I see the way the Leafs are playing, when I see the way Montreal is playing, I don't see a lot of teams that look like they're geared up and ready for the playoffs.
Yeah, I mean, no, and that's I've been saying this all along. It 'tis the season. I mean, it just, the way it is, I think right now around the league, I would call this too. And, we got Ty and LeBrokery here. To me, this is vintage dog days of summer. It's to the point where, I mean, it's like being at the end of the preseason. Now people are ready for the playoffs. Like, at the preseason, now you can't wait for the regular season. Then you can't wait for the halfway point. Then you can't wait for the playoffs. So I think that's where a lot of teams are at. I think a lot of teams, let's be frank, Sean, as much as it's been fun to have the all-Canadian division in the North, I think teams are getting sick of seeing one another. We saw you get that whole thing with Hyman, that intensity. There's starting to be, those teams didn't see each other much. Now they're seeing each other plenty. Now there's a little bit of dislike that's happening out there. I know, and again, sorry, this is way earlier. I don't think it was an intentional chop by Zach Hyman. I think that I don't people think so who have been in the situation where you're battling in front of the net and you're kind of falling to the ice, he definitely wanted to slash him. But after Forbert and Hyman got tangled up, that's when his stick kind of got out of control and he got him in the face. So I think that I don't see that being suspension worthy by any stretch. I don't think this was a sneaky dirty play by any stretch. Zach Hyman plays hard, and he's not the kind of guy who's going to chop someone in the face. Not at all. I don't see that as an issue at all.
Hey,
we discussed the line change?
Hold on. Do you see this by Mark Ald? Did you read this by Damian Cox? Did he say this? The Jets are the lone team in the North that plays the Leafs like they know the Leafs are a soft team. I mean, it sounds like something that Damian would say.
Well, Damien was mentioning also Hellebuck, saying that when Hellebuck is as zoned in as he is, it can kind of get into the Leafs' heads, like something that you brought up earlier in the year, Sean. And like I had said, that although the depth is such a huge thing, I mean, if the great equalizer is the depth, the great eraser is the depth. For me, the great equalizer is Hellebuck. So I just don't see another team in the division that has that sort of confidence. I mean, Carey Price when he's on, sure, but Carey Price is not at Connor Hellebuck's level at this point.
No. I mean, one player's in his prime, one is past it, right? So, I mean, hey, maybe it's actually interesting. Ken, we were talking. We do these digital hits for Sportsnet, and it's almost like you go pick a fight with another representative from another market, and kind of like spar over it. And one idea I'd had was calling up angles and saying, Connor Hellebuck is a better goaltender than Carey Price. Prove me wrong, kind of thing, right? And I guess what it comes down to, you go look at it. Carey Price, I think, does he have just one Vezina win? I think so. When I look back, he's only got one. But there was clearly a time, it's hard to make that case because of his success, not only in the NHL, what he did, what those teams that he carried, same as Connor Hellebuck did last season. There were Montreal Canadiens teams that survived, and he, again, the great eraser takes a lot of, the inefficiency of those teams and makes them go away. But the one thing that, that the hole in that argument is, I mean, look what Carey Price has done on the international level. Like until we see Connor Hellebuck doing that with Team USA, it's going to be hard to say that he's going to hit the career that Carey Price had. But I mean, he keeps at it. Yeah. Oh, Price has a heart as well. I forgot about that. Yeah. I mean, listen, we know when Carey Price was Carey Price, like right in the middle of being Carey Price, there wasn't any better. He was on track to not even looking like the best goalie in the league at a time, but the best goalie of a generation, starting to think of where he fit in the pantheon of great goaltenders, right? Mm-hmm. Connor Hellebuck is on that road. He's traveling that road, but he's right at the beginning of that road. And there's a long way to go before you get into that conversation. But hey, if you're making that argument when the argument's already proven, how much fun is that, right? You got to make the argument and suggest, that's where we're heading, right? So anyway,
here, hang on a second. We have, just based on Scott's experience and how close he watches the Jets. I mean, I'm not sure if Scott is familiar with where you think that Dubois can end up on. Be interested in Scott's take on what he thinks. Sean thinks that eventually Dubois might end up with Lowry and Appleton.
Yeah, so I'd love to hear what Scott has to say about this, because I mean, when you've got an ex-NHLer in the chat group, I mean, he's the guy who is going to be able to take the stuff that we're saying and be like, either this has merit or this is ridiculous. My whole thing is based on the fact I think that Connor Scheifele and Wheeler are going to end up back together when Wheeler gets back, and on the premise that Ehlers and Stastny and Kopp, I believe, have been the best line that the Jets have had this year, and it seems to be unlocking Ehlers again. So if there's nowhere else to go, I mean, is it such a big problem if you move Dubois not only to the wing but put him alongside Lowry and make them your super duper shutdown line on that third line?
Yep.
I mean, I know that I can tell you this, Ken. I know the Jets don't want to do that. I know I can tell you that right off the bat. They don't want to go down that road. I just keep thinking, the way Nick Ehlers played tonight, if you have a couple more games like tonight where the Jets top line plays the way that they did, of course that's with Dubois, but does anyone really think that, Blake Wheeler doesn't have a place waiting for him in the top six when he gets back? That's happening. Let's scrub that thought out of your mind right off the bat. But I mean, if that second line is going and Wheeler comes back, are you going to move Dubois down and risk upsetting that line? I think the Jets will do that. But if it doesn't work, if they move him and like, I guess people always suggest Stastny ends up down there. I've said this time and time again. If you're ranking the Jets centers this year, the way they've performed in the role, I put, Lowry probably first, Scheifele second, and I have Stastny third, and Dubois fourth. And again, people get upset when I say it, and we always end up talking about this, Ken, and everyone ends up always like attacking.
There's a few more
but
PLD fans in the
I mean,
chat
I don't think it's a bad thing to say that a 22-year-old kid who's going to be this team's cornerstone centerman for a lot of years to come is just at a stage where, that you may have better players in those spots and in those places, and he can still play a very valuable role if he does that. Sure.
And John Vinnick, the reason why you wouldn't is that would mean Kyle Connor goes on Lowry's line, unless, so that unless Kopp goes to center. So
Ken, let's explore
that. So
let's explore this. If we leave Dubois up there, which I think most people like that. I like that Wheeler, Scheifele, and Dubois line, and sure. I think in the end that line didn't get broken up because it didn't work. It got broken up because they wanted to start the Dubois at center experiment. But if we look at it and say, okay, maybe they'll keep that line together, the question becomes. Is Paul Maurice at a spot where he doesn't believe that Ehlers and Connor make a good mix because it's too much of the same thing, is the term we've heard him say that before. Yeah. I mean, are we at the stage where we should assume that the Ehlers and Connor experiment is over?
I don't think it's over, again, because Stastny could end up with Lowry and Appleton. So it's not over necessarily. Like we said, if Dubois stays on the top line with Wheeler and Scheifele, then you would have, Stastny would be
Stas, Connor, and Ehlers.
Yeah. So I mean, you could still see it happening there. So again, there's lots to happen here. Lots of things are going on. There's a lot of options to go through. I like Dubois' game. I know some people were wondering about the hit. For me, it was a legal check to the head, but only because Kerfoot was bent over. That's not a suspendable hit to me either. He put himself in a bad position. It was, partially from I wouldn't call it a blindside hit. He definitely hit his head into the boards, but it wasn't a boarding where he hit him directly from behind and saw numbers. It was more head contact. And the only reason there was really head contact is because Kerfoot was leaned forward. So I think it was a minor penalty for sure. But again, I don't think that's a suspendable hit.
Hey, I love this question from my guy Tyson here. He says, PLD's playoff display last playoffs, is that a fluke or what we should look forward to? Because I like that last comment by Scott where he said, it's again something, God, we should get Scott on the show and talk with him about this, but his idea that he thinks PLD is a better player than what he's shown so far. I mean, the one thing I'll say about this, Ty, is when we talked with Paul Maurice, or I may be gleaning this in trying to read between the lines, but earlier in the year, after they got Pierre-Luc Dubois and when they headed to Toronto for the first time, we in the media were talking about the excitement of having Pierre-Luc Dubois, who had done that to Austin Matthews last year. And is that what we were going to see? Is that where they were going to pick up? And in my mind, Ken, I don't know if you agree with me on this, but Paul Maurice poured ice cold water all over that and didn't want anything to do with that storyline. And from what his actions afterwards, it makes it clear to me that he would rather have Adam Lowry take on that assignment than have Pierre-Luc Dubois take on that assignment. And in his answers to those questions to me, they were almost cautionary, and let's not rush this along too fast. There's plenty of time for Pierre-Luc Dubois to be that guy. We don't need him to be that guy right now with the Winnipeg Jets. So let's give him some time to get there. And I mean, I think there's, if that's what's happening there, I think that's some sage advice in that, yeah, Pierre-Luc Dubois did that last year. And I don't say it's a fluke, Tyson, but what I do, this is my personal opinion, Kenny's going to hit this afterwards. I don't think it's a fluke, but I don't think we're at the stage in his young career where you could expect him to maybe replicate that again and again and again. I think you will down the road. I think he's shown his capabilities. But hey, young players can come out, and it doesn't mean that they have one good playoffs and then they're consistently a career playoff performer after that. I don't think that's the case. And I think that's what Paul Maurice was guarding against when he poured cold water on that, was that we don't need him to be that yet. So let's give him time to develop into the player that we know he can be, shelter him in the meantime, and let Adam Lowry, who is right in the prime of his career and capable of doing this, let him take that assignment.
He just didn't want to put any extra pressure on him, Sean. That for me, that was simple. I'm not sure it was even cold water. It was just that he sort of went out of his way to say, hey, previously when he rolls into Toronto, all he had to talk about every time was Laine versus Matthews, and now people wanted to make it Matthews versus Dubois. So I think that was more to do with it. In terms of whether it was a fluke, I don't think it was a fluke at all. And here's a great example in this hockey game today, Sean, and we could tell that anyone who listened to Paul Maurice after the game talk about Nikolai Ehlers. When Nikolai Ehlers was 22 years old, there were ups and downs in his game. So hey, Pierre-Luc Dubois is 22 years old now, so there are going to be ups and downs in his game. There are going to be times when he's incredibly dominant, like he was in the bubble. But again, those are rare moments. Hat tricks in the playoffs are rare moments. So the fact that he did it against the Toronto Maple Leafs had all this glare on it. So again, people shouldn't expect Dubois to get a hat trick every game, but they'll expect him to make an impact. And I definitely see him having an impact in the playoffs. So I think that he's had a strong game today. I think he's going to continue to go and build. I've said this before, probably almost every single show for those of you who are new. Nobody here, he can right now, Pierre-Luc Dubois only needs to be a complimentary player. So he can be that. He has a lot of offensive support. Nobody has gone through what he did this year. Public divorce from the team who drafted him. He's a guy who had to go through a quarantine situation, then got hurt, now trying to play. He essentially was playing all year playing catch up after a year that he already had a ton of pressure on himself and was living in a COVID society. So I've said this from the very beginning, don't draw snap judgments on Pierre-Luc Dubois, what he is, what he's going to become. He's got a very high potential. He's going to be excellent for the Jets, and I wouldn't worry about him at all. I mean, can he play better? Yes. And again, the thing that I really double down on is that Pierre-Luc Dubois isn't out there saying, you know what, I think he's playing great. Well, he's not saying that. He said, I want to do more, and I'm going to do more. So give this some time to play out.
Scott T asked the question, will Maurice at least try Wheeler on the third line? No. Moving on. Hey, you know what I take away from what I saw tonight between the Jets and the Leafs? This was the opportunity for the Leafs depth to show, without a couple of their top players in the lineup, to show that we are capable of making a mark against this team. And I have to say, I think for the vast majority of this season against the Jets, the Leafs depth, which, at the beginning of the season, when I made the claim with a lot of my colleagues, especially out of Toronto, that the Jets were the deepest team in Canada, there was a lot of scoffing when I made that suggestion. And a lot of people thought that the Leafs were that team. I think tonight, I walk away from that effort and from what I've seen in the past to think, if the roles were reversed and Nick Ehlers and Mark Scheifele were out of the Jets lineup, do we really think that we wouldn't see players like Matthew Perreault, Adam Lowry, Nate Thompson, Adam Kopp put their stamp on a game? I mean, those guys would be going out there and they would be affecting that game left, right, and center. And I'm not seeing that from the Leafs. And tonight was a night for them to step in and say, okay, you know what? Our top dog is gone. We gotcha. I thought it was a no-show in that regard. And to me, I am entirely at the place where I'm comfortable in saying with great confidence that if these two teams get into the playoffs and play against each other, it is going to require a Herculean effort by the top end of the Toronto Maple Leafs lineup to get by the Jets, because I don't think that the Leafs depth can handle the Jets depth. Now, I'm going to couch that just quickly by saying what Nick Foligno is going to do when he comes into this lineup is going to be interesting to see how that balance goes. But I will say this, it's been nothing in my mind but swings and misses from the Leafs depth when they've lined up against the Jets this season.
Yeah, I mean, Galchenyuk had a nice goal today. There's no doubt about that. I mean, he's probably playing a little bit higher in the lineup than he's going to be come playoff time. And if Galchenyuk's on the third or fourth line, then you got a guy who can score. I know it's been a tough couple of years for him. There's no doubt. I thought that the Leafs' depth looked a little bit slow today, Sean. Again, I'm a big fan of what Wayne Simmons has done in his career. Jason Spezza had a couple of stretches. Thornton, I didn't see a whole lot out of Joe Thornton today. It looked like Joe's probably a guy who's ready to go for the playoffs now too. I mean, it's that time of year, like we said. But yeah, I mean, it's interesting. You're right. I mean, there wasn't a lot going on. I mean, in the games in Winnipeg, Sean, Alex Kerfoot looked excellent, right? Alex Kerfoot had all the speed. He had that great shorthanded goal. And again, maybe it had something to do with the hit that he took, but I didn't notice Alex Kerfoot very much. I mean, Wayne Simmons,
I'll be honest, I noticed him for the wrong reasons.
Oh,
I thought that they were, the Jets were handling him very well and very easily this evening.
Yeah, no doubt. And again, I think Nick Foligno was a smart pickup for them because of what he can do. He's, Foligno slow. I mean, they're not asking him to go end to end. They're asking him to play a physical game and get to the net. So I think that Foligno was a smart pickup. I mean, what kind of impact will he have? We'll see about that. I think he's going to have an impact. I think Sean, we've talked about this. One of the reasons the Leafs picked him up was to play against the Jets. And
I think that's exactly why they picked him. I think they picked him up to address exactly what we're talking about. They need some depth down the lineup and some guys who are harder to play against. And Nick Foligno is a great player. That's a great ad. I mean, if I'm a Toronto Maple Leafs fan, I love that ad. If I'm a guy who's building a team, I love that ad, especially in this situation. And you know what, I'm gonna ask this last one here, Ken, because I don't want to dive too deep into the Leafs because I know our chat room hates it when we do that. They get plenty of Leafs coverage elsewhere, but I just wonder if covering the Edmonton Oilers last year for Gino, who was out for a bit, and I went and covered off that beat for a bit. Talking with Dave Tippett, he made it pretty clear that at some point, like if the Oilers were going to succeed, they needed to break up Leon Draisaitl and Connor McDavid. Those guys were going to have to become drivers on two separate lines to space it out so that teams couldn't just key on that one line. I'm looking at that Leafs lineup and I'm thinking, I don't know that you can have Austin Matthews and Mitch Marner on the same line and beat a team like the Jets in a 7-game series in the playoffs. Like, I feel like you're going to need to do like a Tavares on one line, an Austin Matthews on another line, and a Mitch Marner on another line, and try and fill those guys on either side to try and make it work. Because I don't think when you stack those guys up in the top, I don't think there's enough in the bottom six to be able to take on the third line the Jets are going to send out against those guys.
Yeah, Nylander too. You can't forget Nylander. And I know that he's a guy that can go long stretches without doing anything, but he's got a lethal shot. So he's the kind of guy that can be dangerous in a series. So one thing too, we should go to Hannel here. I mean, we're getting late on the clock here.
Yeah, let's go there.
Hannel,
yeah,
I'll start if you don't mind.
I'd love it with you. Yeah.
A lot of, I thought he made, for a guy who hadn't played for a month, he made a lot of aggressive reads. Maybe one or two of them didn't work out. I thought his puck moving abilities were steady. On the goal, he stepped up at the blue line. There's nothing wrong with that. It just seemed as though, again, what we talked about, a little bit of a late line change. And then once DeMello went towards the corner to try to break up the pass, that left the front of the net open, and Dubois was late getting there. But again, I think that had more to do with the line change effect there. But I thought overall he was steady. I think, again, anyone who thought that Ville Hannel was going to play 20 minutes tonight, you should temper your expectations. The guy hadn't played in a month. Would you like to see what he does going out more with the first and second line? Well, yes, but the coach isn't going to put him in that position. Not because he doesn't trust him, but because he doesn't want to put him in a position to look bad or fail. I mean, he played just under 13 minutes. I thought there were a lot of, steady, smart plays that were, made. Paul Maurice said before the game that he wasn't going to put a whole lot of stock into it based on the circumstances. At the same time, he went out of his way to compliment him. So I would like to see him again. I want to see him next week when Austin Matthews is in the lineup, when Nylander's in the lineup, when Nick Foligno's in the lineup. And then, there too, he should be sheltered to a degree because he's 20 years old. So a lot of things that he can do, he did well tonight. I thought it was an important first step. Same for Hannel. He said he liked a lot of his game, but he knows that he's going to be a lot better the next time he plays because it won't be a month between games.
I want to pivot to a question or a comment by one of our guy Waiters 27 here, who I like the way he contributes to the chat room. Says one of those Pittsburgh Cups, Letang didn't even play in the playoffs, bringing up their defense. So there's exceptions to every rule, and I'm going to use a football analogy first before we go into hockey. But you can't win a championship without a championship level quarterback. That's almost a perfect rule, except for the fact that Brad Johnson won a Super Bowl with the Tampa Bay Buccaneers because they had the second best defense of all time. At the time, they were the first best defense of all time. And Trent Dilfer won a Super Bowl with the Baltimore Ravens because they had the number one defense of all time, supplanting that Tampa Bay Buccaneers team. To take it back to hockey, you can't win championships without a solid defense. And this, what he brings up, and I think both you and I covered the Penguins for a little bit on their run when this happened. I didn't think that the Penguins had a chance, and they didn't have a very good defense. And a lot of times what you think is not a very good team, like I remember when Gretzky was winning all the cups, and then Pittsburgh started winning cups, and everyone said, oh yeah, like Mario's better than Gretzky because he's winning it with, not very good guys on his team. And then you go back and you look at the guys on those teams, and it's a phenomenal lineup, right? But this Pittsburgh unit that went on to win the cup without Letang, if you go look at the players that were on that team, they didn't go to be, Ole Mata didn't turn out to be an absolute star in this league. And so I only bring this up because of the Jets and their situation, because I have had this thought, and it sounds like Waiters 27 has had it too throughout the year. I have had this thought about, the Jets don't look like they have a championship level defense. It looks like the kind of defense that should cost you and keep you from winning a championship. However, we know how deep they are up front, and we know how good Connor Hellebuck is. And it's made me think the Pittsburgh Penguins showed us that it's possible to win with not potentially a championship level defense. And I'm wondering if you see any parallels between the Winnipeg Jets and their possibilities this year with the defense core they have compared to what we saw from that Pittsburgh team.
You have a Vezina goaltender and you have elite level forwards. So, there could be some similarities, sure. But for me, again, it's more about the collective than just the 6-man unit on the back end. We said this before. Josh Morrissey's playing at a high level. That's certainly a benefit for the Jets. And again, I think he's had a better stretcher recently for sure. Neil Pionk is going to play at a steady level. Yes, that Penguins team had Hainsey, it had Justin Schultz, I believe, and Dumoulin. These guys aren't, they're a little bit, they're not headliners, but they're still steady players. I think that, and again, they had two of the best players in the world in Malkin and Crosby, and then their depth guys were producing in those years. So, I take nothing away. I think that the Penguins had excellent teams those years. Did they have a, all-star back end with Norris Trophy winners playing? No, but they were still steady. Could there be some similarities? Sure. But, again, Ben Lovejoy plays hard. Big, strong guy. Lovejoy would be similar to like a Derek Forbert kind of player.
Yeah.
Trevor Daley played hard.
There you go. This is great. I'm not crapping on these players, but it isn't. It isn't a situation where we walked away from this and realized that, Dumoulin was on his way to being one of the best defensemen in the league, and Mata ended up being, this isn't realizing later that Nick Jarmelson is like maybe the best defenseman on that team when he's, no one knew who he was because of the Seabrooks and the Keiths ahead of him. It's not that situation. These are guys who are all, they're NHL players and they're good and they work hard. And Lovejoy went on and played a really good role with Dallas a couple of years later. They're usable guys that you want on your team, but this is not, you don't look at this and think that's a defense that wins you a championship.
Yeah, I would also say too that it's more same thing. So the similarity, Sean, is the group is greater than the sum of its parts, right? So I would say that would be the similarity for me.
Okay. Ken, we're going to wrap it up. We're supposed to keep these things to an hour. So we're going to wrap it up for the evening.
Some people have been wondering about, I think that Stanley probably plays Saturday, but again, it's hard for us to know without knowing the status of Derek Forbert, who's going to be in and who's going to be out. And the Jets, they're off tomorrow after playing back-to-back after a long road trip, so we're not going to know until Saturday morning, essentially. So
yeah, I got the sense from Paul Maurice after tonight that Hannel would be coming out. I don't know about you. That's the sense that I got.
Yeah, I'm not sure. I think I wouldn't be surprised if he played against Edmonton, like just to try to go back-to-backs. But again, I mean, also too, Jordy Ben, I don't expect Ben to play on Saturday because he hasn't been on the ice. So I expect we'd see Ben in one of the games in the 3 games against Toronto. That's when I would expect to see him. And it's also interesting to see when we're going to see Wheeler. That's the other part for me that I think it's probably they're going to be on the safe side and probably bring him back in that Toronto series.
Right. It didn't. Yeah. Paul Maurice kind of tipped his cap on that, did he not?
Yeah. I mean, he said he needed full contact practice, and if the Jets aren't skating, it's hard to imagine a practice with a coach or somebody counting as contact.
Right. Okay. Thanks everyone for joining us. Another spirited debate. Loved having everyone in there.
360 at one point.
What's that?
The numbers were up at 360 at one point.
Pretty impressive. No, I know it's we had great pregame numbers, great postgame numbers. I don't know. I at 360 maybe. I think we hit 370 another night. But I mean, this is phenomenal. The Space Explorer says, as usual, great show, guys. It's a great show because everyone keeps coming in and feeding the show and giving us such good stuff to work off of, and we just basically get to tackle the themes that people are bringing in here. The show is great because our audience is great, and our audience is great because they've got great ideas and they keep bringing them into the show, and we keep building the show off of them. So thank you so much for doing that. Tomorrow morning, 9 a.m., we're going to have our long form Friday podcast. We're going to be joined by Sammy Cosentino. We're going to talk a little bit of prospects, and he's going to give us a real good look at Cole Perfetti. And he's just a super interesting guy. I love Sammy. I didn't realize, Kenny, that you have had such a solid relationship with him. We'll get into that tomorrow in the show. That's going to be phenomenal. And Jeff Merrick also joining us on the show, who I'm told will have these vast reservoirs of information on guys from their Adam hockey days. He's one of those guys walking encyclopedia.
Wade, big night here, Sean. Wade Allison. He's from Myrtle. He was born in Carmen. Went to school in Carmen and Roland. Made his NHL debut with the Philadelphia Flyers tonight.
Excellent stuff. Love our Manitoba connections. So thank you everybody for showing up. Really appreciate that. Love to see you tomorrow morning at 9 a.m. as we do those shows. We're really proud of those shows, and we love the way we get our guests to open up on there. And then we'll be back at it Saturday, pregame, 45 minutes before the game on Instagram. Saw someone asking earlier. It's at SN Sean Reynolds on Instagram, and right here where you're seeing us on the postgame. If you're watching us on Twitter, go check out our YouTube. It's the easiest way to watch us. And if you're watching us on YouTube and you haven't subscribed, what are you waiting for? Click that subscribe button so we can get to you more often. Love spending time with you. Love you contributing. Thank you so much, everyone, for coming by. And we will see you hopefully tomorrow morning.